Hello and welcome everyone to the second episode of the Sports Post Lockdown webinar series. I am Vineet Karnik, Business Head, Entertainment, Sports and Live Events at Group M. This series is presented by Gain Access Sports and Entertainment and Sports Power and powered by Brand Ed Events. Just to set the context for this webinar, sports industry in India has been growing at a healthy CAGR of 12.8% over the last 10 years, with overall sports sponsorship market in India crossing the mark of 9,000 crores, which is about $1,300 million for the first time in 2019. 2020 was supposed to be the year of Tokyo Olympics, T20 World Cup, Euro T20, along with India's major tournament, that is Vivo IPL. With most of the sports tournament either cancelled or indefinitely postponed, YOY growth estimations for the year 2020 pre-COVID will be upended for sure. Sports is a universal language that connects people regardless of their origin, background, religious belief, and economic positions. Sports brings us together. Once the dust around COVID-19 settles down, sports will play a pivotal role in helping fans deal with the emotional stress, post-pandemic trauma, and give people a large number of reasons to cheer up and look forward to. Mobile gaming is one such area that is expected to be the biggest gainer in the post-COVID-19 era. We have already seen 20% increase in the monthly active users during the lockdown in India. Internationally, we have also witnessed right holders toying with gaming and virtual sports as a concept to keep athletes and fans engaged in the lockdown times. For example, UAE Touring launching cycling event called UAE Tour Mubadala Ramadan Virtual Challenge on virtual cycling platform Zwift. We see more of such events pushing the envelope of virtual and real world mergers. Brands which were estimated to spend about $46 billion on sports sponsorship in 2020 are facing some tough choices. What do they do now that nearly most of the events have been postponed or suspended? How can they continue to engage passionate sports audience going forward? These are some of the questions that are coming to everyone's mind. And to put that into perspective, today's topic of this second episode of this webinar is extremely relevant. Sports media and sponsorship revenue impact. And to discuss on this very, very important subject, we have a fantastically curated panel of experts. To introduce you one by one, we have from the US, from Chicago, Mark Levitt, Senior Director of Business Development, Chicago Bulls. Remus de Cruz, Head Sports Marketing, Apollo Tires. And Atit Mehta, Head of Marketing, Byju's The Learning App. Before we start the flow of the webinar, I just want to ask one question to start off this one to all the panelists in terms of some opening statement from all you guys. So could I have an opening statement from all three of you about your views on sports media rights and sponsorship revenue impact in the times of COVID, and what could be the new normal going forward? We will start with you, Mark, then we'll go to Remus and Atit.
Sure, thanks, and good morning from Chicago. Good evening to everyone watching in India. I'm happy to be here. Look, I think it'd be naive to think that we don't have challenges ahead in the industry, but I think the overriding feeling that I have and the people that I've worked with and talked to have is, to your point, Vineet, that sports transcends religion, it transcends race, and it connects people, and that is not going away. I think, if anything, everyone's spending time alone in their house, either by themselves or with their spouses or kids. They are craving that connection to other people. So when sports does come back, that ability for brands to engage through the team with their consumers is going to be as important as ever. It just might take a different form of assets.
Hi guys, namaste. So pretty much like what Mark said, I'm a strong believer of you build the brand and the business will follow. So most organizations who can sustain themselves in the long run, they will definitely stick to their long-term strategies and keep to what they were doing in the sports world or with their sponsorships. Yes, in the short term, you're going to have a few hard calls which you have to make. That's a no-brainer. But sports is something that binds people together. It cuts across religions, boundaries, or anything else, right? So people are going to watch it. It does lift the sentiment of the people. So you're going to see governments definitely support it. We've seen that in Spain already, where the Spanish government is supporting La Liga and making sure that they push through and get their league going. So in short, in the long term, I don't see any major impact in terms of your strategy going forward. But yes, there are hard calls to be made in the short term.
Hi, good morning, Mark, and good evening, everybody back in India. So as far as sports is concerned, so I personally feel it's like a 6 months, 8 months of a break, but it will come back, and it will come back much, much more strongly. As Remus said, that we just need to stay to what we are doing, stay put to the overall strategy as far as sponsorship is concerned, and brands who rely heavily on sports and sports sponsorship, take it in your stride, and once we come back, we'll come back much, much more stronger. Consumer interest would be bigger, participation would be higher, and more people would now get engaged, because whatever we have missed out over the last 6 months, we will come back in a very, very strong way.
That's absolutely exciting and positive start to this, and absolutely glad to know the opening comments from our experts. Coming to you, Remus, considering the current situation of live sports and the fact that all of it may be played to empty stands in the immediate or short term, would you change your media mix on sports? Say, for example, on ground, on air, digital. Would you consider, because you've been present across the things, would you consider changing the media mix?
So honestly, it all depends on which part of the sponsorship or marketing cycle a brand is in, right? So if you're in the initial phase of brand awareness, a brand can still get away with on-ground signage, jerseys presence, because he's trying to push what Oppo did probably with the BCCI deal, right? Right in the beginning 2 years ago, and they can still tick all the boxes. Now, if a brand is more evolved and you're looking at building a little more credibility for your brand, for your product, you're looking at more engagement. That's where you're going to get a little hampered in terms of your strategy. The one thing that is going to be missing over the next few months, maybe even to a year or so, is going to be the money can't buy experience. So when you do sponsorship, a lot of our tangibles are, you pretty much deliver on those. So your on-ground signage, tickets, etc. But the one thing that differentiates your sponsorship or actually adds more bang to the buck and gets you to sell more product is that money can't buy experience. And that traditionally we've always seen as taking somebody to the stadium, giving them behind the looks into the dressing rooms, taking them to the training grounds, meet the players, etc. Those things are going to be some things that we will need to relook at and redefine. So in short, yes, you will start looking at different avenues, trying to be more innovative in how you approach this part of the sponsorship. And I think the good thing that I've seen is that we are looking at digital and online in a very different way now. So the old approach of how we would normally access or put out messaging, etc., that has changed. And also the way we are allowing our own brand assets to open up to others coming in and taking over, that has changed. So I think that's going to be a good thing going forward. So you're going to use your assets more innovatively, so to say.
That's quite interesting, Remus, considering you are the one at the helm of the affairs where you're also invested in the sports in India and also in some assets worldwide. So that's quite interesting. Coming to you, Atit, sports, mainly cricket, has been a key strategic platform or a partner in the growth of Byju's as a strong e-learning brand. Purely from a brand character's perspective, it is not the stadium that is your arena to play very clearly, but the screen is what you're focusing on. So is it fair to say that IPL, particularly being played is the primary consideration for you to be IPL on ground or on TV? Because obviously we're looking at in the short term that we don't really see too many fans coming to the stadium. So is that something which you would consider from a screen versus on-ground experience?
No, so screen has always been our number one priority because the scale and reach which you get, a stadium will give you about 1 lakh people at any given point in time. A screen will give you like 100x, 200x of that. Having said that, screen will remain the single largest important strategic area for a brand like ours. But sports in an empty stadium would probably take away all the excitement, all the fun which we have while watching a cricket match or a football match. And specifically to IPL, we have been reading a lot of news. There has been a lot of articles over the last 24 to 48 hours that Star Sports is gearing up for an IPL with empty stands. That's great. At least there would be something. Currently, we have nothing. There would be something, but will the experience be the same? Now, we have never seen this. It's a new normal. So we will have to walk the talk. We'll have to keep the faith and take a leap of faith as we go forward. But yeah, as somebody who watches sports and somebody as a consumer, as a sports person, absolutely not. You need the crowd in a stadium compared to what it would be without an empty stadium. But yeah, from a business perspective, it is better, probably about 75 to 80% efficiency on an empty ground.
Absolutely, Atit, and I completely buy your point, because considering that we've been locked in for almost about 50 plus days, and we're not going to be seeing any live action, at least in India, for at least a couple of months now. I think something to cheer for. That's absolutely fair to say. Mark, coming to you, you have been at the forefront of one of the biggest sporting leagues in the world, representing one of the biggest club franchises. NBA was one of the first leagues to have announced a hiatus. What has been the Bulls' approach to partnerships in general, and how has that approach been retooled in the face of this COVID so far?
So I think at the highest level, the approach doesn't change, right? Our partnerships are about leveraging our brand to help the companies that we work with accomplish their various goals. The way we go about that is what has to change. I think, from a relationship standpoint, what we've done over the past couple of months has just been in constant contact with the brands we work with to ensure that they know, hey, we're going to figure out a solution together. We don't necessarily have it today, but when games do resume, we're going to be able to add the value that you may have lost out on at the tail end of last season. I think, to Atit's point, one thing I expect is if it becomes normal for a short period of time, whether in the NBA or other sports or in other countries, that there are games played without fans, I think it's going to challenge these leagues and teams to enhance the at-home viewership experience, whether it's through new technologies, new types of social media content. I think opportunities will inevitably arise out of that. I think for us personally, as we look forward, 99.9% of our fans never come to a game, ever. And we have 70 million fans in India that will never come to a game. So how can we spend our energy and focus our time to reach and engage with those millions upon millions of people in a way that's beneficial to our partners?
That's absolutely fantastic, Mark, because as Atit referred, in the last 48 to 72 hours, there has been quite a lot of conversations within India around the usage of technology and how AR and VR kind of tools can really play out and in the fan engagement sort of ecosystem. I had to ask you guys this after a very intensive first round. 2 quick rapid fire questions, guys. Okay. So we'll start with Mark, then we'll move to Remus and Atit. Okay. So in this lockdown phase, we all have been hungry, predominantly all of us who are on the panel and people who are watching this webinar are sports fans and fanatics, I would say. So in this lockdown phase with no live action on sports, tell us, how have you been coping with your daily doses of sport? Because that's what pumps us out every morning and evening, right? So what have you guys been watching, doing? How are you managing the entire stress of this lockdown? Yeah.
So I won't talk too much about the Last Dance documentary because I know we're going to talk about it later. But that's been a big part of it for for me, I mean, look, I'm really lucky that I work for a brand like the Bulls, and my job is to talk about sports. And so even though when we're talking to partners, it's not always about the team, that still comes up. And if you've read the news, our team made some exciting new additions to our basketball operations department over the past several months. So that's kept us pretty busy. And look, there have been times where my wife has asked, why are you watching a game on ESPN that happened 5 years ago? And my answer is because that's what's on. So I think I certainly miss the live action as much as everybody else does.
And how are you managing the stress, Mark? Because work and no sport happening, I'm sure there's pressure on business. So there is stress. So we obviously need to de-stress ourselves, right?
Yeah, I think the silver lining in all this is we all get to spend a little bit more time with our families. Some probably appreciate it more than others after 8 weeks together, but I think it's been nice for us. And one thing we've done that we really haven't done before is we've actually started cooking at home as opposed to ordering out every night. So that's been a change for us.
Sure. Rimas?
Mark mentioned The Last Dance, and that's something I've been catching up on. Besides that, I've caught a few of the old football classic games, United Juventus, Champions League finals. But I've also caught up on a lot of the sports movies, the old sports movies, Coach Carter, Ali, things like that. So I've watched a few of the old sports movies, and it kind of fills the void to a bit, but not as much as you'd want with live sport. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Sure. Atit, I know you've been very active. You actually go down and play cricket, right? So now, I mean, how are you managing?
So I'm doing two things to just keep the sports inside my body and inside my system. So the good part is both the sports channels in the country, Star Sports as well as Sony, both of them are showing last 10 years best matches as far cricket is concerned. Now, for example, Sony is showing the Benson and Hedges series, which where we won the tournament, and Star is showing the previous World Cups and best innings. So that is one thing which I'm doing quite often, and with no other live programming, the repeats are quite often, so you will not miss out a good match. And the other thing is I'm figuring out a way to keep myself occupied. So I have some sports equipment, these are the scoops, cricket balls I have a football next to me. So I just keep on playing in the house. I just tap it. I just roll the ball onto the wall and kick it back to me. So that keeps the sports entertainment going, at least for myself and the family, which is not appreciating that.
Fantastic. So Rimas, coming back to you, from a long-term sponsorship perspective, the dilemma might be to cut your losses, or either I exit of this sponsorship, or is there any alternative to stay from a long-term perspective, to be seen as a real partner to the sport, so that all the fans recognize you as one of the important pillars of that team or sport or whatever? What do you think is happening around the minds of various different brands? A quick perspective from you on this?
Two things. One is long-term deal in my book reads as a strategic investment. So, right, if it's strategic, you don't want to mess around with it too much. Also, longer-term deals are harder to get out of, generally. I mean, we've seen Kodak, they were with the Olympics till 2012 or 2016. That was a long time after their business wasn't really doing well and didn't justify that. So I definitely think that, you're going to stay with the strategic investments, you're going to stay long-term. Yes, you're going to look at renegotiating rights, you're going to look at renegotiating value of the deal, maybe, over a period of time. And that's what you're going to do. Rights holders themselves also, I feel, are going to be, empathetic to the brands right now. And because most brands or most organizations aren't going to be doing too well, numbers are falling, you've lost 3 months of business. So I think if they're looking at value partners for the long term, most rights holders are going to start, talking to the organizations that they're partnering associated with and looking at renegotiating contracts. So whether it is a different set of rights, reduced rights fees, all of that is definitely going to happen. I think people have to come out of this together. So it's not just going to be the brand dictating or the rights holders dictating. In some cases, it's easier for the rights holders because they've got that monopoly. But overall, if you're looking at a strategic partner who's been with you, who has a long-term vision, you're going to be a little empathetic and warmer to the situation.
Yeah, fair enough. So you're saying that people will have to come together, understand each other, rally together, and come out of the situation. That's an absolute fair way to look at it. Atit, to you, with the new normal pending, how live sports is going to be presented, and we spoke about it a bit earlier. How will you evaluate new sponsorship opportunities? Any new initiative, any new ideas on ROI, the way you will look at any new metric?
So it's very early to say that what would be the evaluation criteria, but one thing is certain. Now, digital is going to play a very, very important role. Yeah, and what we have seen over the last 55 days of this lockdown, and especially in India, the people are getting used to be at home and getting connected. We have got connected on a virtual call right now. Office work is happening, education is happening, a lot of things are happening on a virtual basis. And I'm 100% sure as the live sport starts, the digital play is going to be much, much more bigger than what it was in the pre-lockdown area. Having said that, the evaluation criteria now is going to be a blended approach. One cannot now look at TV on ground and digital as three separate units. You need to create a sort of a blended approach, a set of a mixture which will add value. If you dial up digital, what is the incremental value you are getting? And if live sports is happening without fans, what are you losing out? So you have to do that math in a way wherein the brands who are investing from a long-term point of view, from a strategic point of view, still gets the value out of it. And I am sure the partners also understand the situation right now. So there would be some open conversation in terms of how do we renegotiate it and create value for each other.
That's absolutely fair, and a lot of points, Atit, actually you mentioned for a lot of people here and people who are possibly watching this webinar to think about. Yeah, there is no one answer, but I'm sure we all will have to figure out different ways to look at the new normal ROI, so to say. Mark, coming to you, could you shed some light on some interesting things the Bulls have done to engage partners during this COVID time, the lockdown time? Mark, can you hear us?
I think we've lost Mark.
Okay, we'll get back to Mark in a bit. Remus, I'll just move to you. Eventually, brands need to start marketing and they need to start selling. Therefore, they will have to start spending at some stage, right? What can brands such as Apollo do to leverage their existing partnerships in sports during this lockdown downtime?
So, as I mentioned earlier, right? You need to build a brand and the business will follow. And in this period of time, you cannot stop communicating with your communities or with your target audience in that sense. So you have to do it. Obviously, you have to be empathetic. You can't be pushing brand. You can't be pushing product out. So you have to, and you can't be philosophical and gyani at the same time. So at Apollo, what we've done is, initially when this whole thing happened and we started communicating about safe distance. So our tagline is go the distance. We started speaking about maintain the distance. And we use sport in terms of the distances in sport, right? So 10 yards for a football wall when you're taking a foul, or the distance between, a free throw line in basketball, and volleyball, you need to be 3 meters away before, you touch the net 3 yards away. We started talking about things like that. And then we started talking to our partners. And again, with sports, the beauty is who better to talk about resilience, determination, grit, patience as a sports person. Because once you have that, that's when you can come out of a crisis like this, right? So we've used our partners with United, with Chennai FC. We've had athletes coming and talking with United. It's called Monday Motivation. With CFC, it's called let me just get that properly. It's called Quarantine Version. So they've been doing this for us, and there athletes talking about how they've come so far in their careers. What are what has made them go the distance? How are they keeping themselves mentally, physically, active during this period? How are they managing this time? And I think that's really helped. We've got some really good engagement through this. And then with our other communities, we've been looking at, the younger communities. We've been looking at bingo, and we've had Bad Road Buddies bingo and things like that. Just engaging with them and keeping them active during this period.
Sure, fair enough. Atit, do you see the impact of this situation fade off eventually in the long run? should brands be rethinking about their long-term strategies, marketing strategies in sports? What's your view on this?
So see, now it's very important for all of us and people who are involved in the business of sports to define what is long term. Yeah, so once that definition is clear, and as Ramesh very rightly put, that if you are a long-term investor and if it's very strategic to your business, then I don't see a big problem. But if I'm a short-term player looking at quick wins, then it is going to be a question of how good is the opportunity, how distressed is the opportunity, and one would then go and sign up, whether it is a sponsorship, whether it is some tie-up, whether it's some partnership with a team or with a sporting event. But over a period of time, brands will stay onto it. The big brands and who are long-term brands will stay onto it. And over a period of time, over the next couple of years, it should all even out. It's starting at a very, very low right now. We're at a very low in terms of no sports, and we don't know how the new normal is going to be. But over a period of time, slowly and gradually, as we open up, as sporting event starts, we will see everything falling back into place. And over a period of couple of years, if not more, it will all average out, and we should be good and happy with everything which we have done as far as sports is concerned.
Sure, fair enough. Is Mark back? Do we have Mark back?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mark, loud and clear.
Sorry, everybody. We're bad thunderstorm in Chicago has seemingly knocked out the internet of our condo building here. So I'm trying to use a hotspot instead.
That's fine, Mark. Never mind. Just to bring you in, one quick question to you. I mean, and if you could quickly shed some light on some interesting things the Bulls have been doing in terms of engaging partners during this downtime.
Sure, absolutely. So a couple examples for the group.
Sure.
When we first started out, or when this hiatus first started and the virus came to the U.S., we wanted to first and foremost make sure that we took the right tone in anything that we did. So the first activation that we executed, we actually brought some partners together to do some good for the folks that are on the front lines. And so we partnered with some of our food and beverage restaurant groups, a player, Zach Levine, to provide meals to over 2,000 healthcare workers and a couple of our hospital partners, and that was really well received. And more than that, it was the right thing to do. On a lighter tone, we've worked with Dunkin' Donuts for years, and for those that have never been to a game, one of the marquee moments of attending a Bulls game is a race between three different Dunkin' Donuts characters: Biggie Bagel, Cuppy Coffee, and Dashing Donut. It's normally played on the scoreboard, and so we turned that into a digital execution where fans could vote on who they thought would win, and then the winner, if they guessed correctly, they received that free item at their local Dunkin' Donuts store. So a little bit lighter, but something that was fun for our fans nonetheless.
Superb. That's fantastic, Mark. In fact, you referred to, and Remus spoke to us about the Last Dance. Tell us a bit more about it, because we all in India are just enjoying it. Most of us have sampled it till now, and we obviously are looking forward to more. Just tell us a bit about how the Last Dance happened. How are you celebrating it? I'm sure it's a top-line show on ESPN and, of course, Netflix globally. Tell us a bit more about the Last Dance.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, as a fan, it's been fantastic. We talked a lot about missing live sports. Well, that's turned into appointment viewing here in the U.S. I know it's put on Netflix in India, but in the U.S., every Sunday night, it's live. We get 2 episodes live, one at 8 and one at 9 p.m., and we're tuned into our TV. I think specifically from a Bulls standpoint, it's done wonders for our digital reach and engagement. So I was talking to our head of social content the other day, and it sounds like our engagement is up 300% each week of the Last Dance, compared to a week during the regular season when we have 3 or 4 home games, which is pretty incredible. Over this past month or so, we've been the number 1 team in North America as far as social content engagement has gone. And a big part of that, really the part of that, is because of the Last Dance.
Fantastic. And we're all enjoying it and looking forward to more, Mark. Absolutely fabulous. Atit, we spoke a bit about esports in the opening part. We all know that coming to mobile gaming and esports, will their collective rise impact the revenues of on-ground sporting events? Do you think there's going to be a radical shift between esports and live sports? Your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think so. There will be a significant impact on live sports because of esports. The audiences are different and there might be some duplication. Now, esports is happening because I have a lot of free time. Data cost has gone down. All of us have devices which can play high octane level of sporting games or e-games or anything else. So these are different set of audiences, but nobody can take away the atmosphere, the fun, the excitement being in a sporting ground, whether it is the football matches or it's the cricket matches or even our local kabaddi matches. You see the enthusiasm and the excitement one gets. So that would be a separate, unique set of people who would always go to a ground, and there would be another cohort, which will be a huge cohort in terms of size, which would be doing esports. But both of them would be separate, unique sets, and there would be very, very less duplication between these two cohorts.
Interesting, Atit. And on that, I would want to bring Remus in, considering you spoke about the audience. One potential limitation of esports and gaming is that it's skewed towards younger demographics. And I'm saying potential because I know that there'll be a lot of point of view and debate on this. So missing the older male TG who have the money to show, extending that logic, brands like yours, Remus, would be more attuned to stick with the older ones, or any fair comments on that?
That's not entirely true, Vineet, because and we've been exploring esports and e-gaming opportunities, right? So here the distinction for us, at least in my mind, between e-gaming and esports. So, we were looking at some numbers for PUBG in India, and there's quite considerable following in the rural markets for PUBG. And, we've, besides the younger lot, from a segment of between 27 to 33, 34, there's big numbers. Again, it's India, so numbers are easy to come by, right? And a rural market is a big one for us from a trucking community or from a agricultural community perspective. And, maybe not in-game placements or in-game sponsorship, but even partnering with a streamer, and doing things with him and product placements there, or, talking to him to do a little product knowledge would help us. That's one opportunity. The other thing that we could look at is the younger audiences directly help us with our two-wheeler or the entry-level four-wheeler segments, right? And again, with the football partnerships that we have, we've already been partnering the supporters groups in various cities, and these are the guys that play FIFA, or for that matter, NBA, 2K as well. So partnering these opportunities and engaging with these audiences isn't something that we haven't thought about. Now, given the next year or so where we cannot do a lot of on-ground activations, this actually presents an opportunity for us to look at more seriously. It might not be in the scale that, other brands would have looked at, maybe like a Red Bull or a Monster. But for us, definitely there's an opportunity here. And given our product portfolio, we can play around with that. And the beauty of E right now is that the entry levels are not very high.
Sure. So
you can still experiment and, look at doing things piecemeal here to see how it works for you.
That's an absolutely good point, Remus, that, since the entry levels are not very prohibitive, you can actually grow with the entire esports and gaming community within India. That's an absolute fair way to look at it. Mark, I want to bring you in here, and we all know that the blank truth remains that a new playbook is required that offers brands alternate strategies for how to continue leveraging sporting relationships and how to sustain the growth. Can you offer a prediction on what partnerships could look like going forward? How will we look at the entire partnership ecosystem, the sponsorship ecosystem going forward? Because that's something which is the genesis and the basis of the entire sporting landscape worldwide. So your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I think to some degree you're going to see trends that have already started become exponentially more important. You know, Remus mentioned targeting a specific age group of folks. So when we talk about using social media for our partners, it's no longer enough to just say, you know, company A is going to get their logo on this random piece of social content. I think there's so much more that's going to have to go into it. First of all, it should have been happening already, but I think moving forward, brands are going to be continually smarter with their dollars. And so if social media is important to them, it's, okay, who are they trying to reach? What type of content can we create that resonates with that specific demographic? And then how do we partner with our internal performance marketing group to make sure the distribution is such that it gets in front of the amount of people that the partner expects? I think if you do those things, we're going to be able to add more value than maybe we even were previous to this. I think the other element in the short term is cause marketing is going to, which has been a buzzword around the industry for years. I think at least in the short term, it's going to be exponentially more important to certain brands. How can teams amplify a campaign that brands are in the market doing, or how can teams take a cause that's important to both parties? And you want alignment, right? You want it to be important to the team and you want it to be important to the brand. And if those two things are aligned, how can they work together to tell a story and do some good within their shared communities that resonates with each of the teams and the brand's consumers?
Sure, Mark. Thank you for that. Before we open this to the Q&A section for a lot of our viewers who are watching this, one last question to all you three people. Okay, if we need to change the way we go to sports events going forward, the way that we behave at the sporting events, the way that we even play sport, then it's also going to be a big question on how much do we have to invest in the future in order to make sport a safe place to watch and to participate again. And it's a burning question in all our minds worldwide. So quick thoughts from all you three, starting with you, Mark.
Sure, and I think it's probably important to say there are a lot of things we'll probably need to do that we don't know yet. I don't necessarily sit here having all the answers, but I think if you look historically, for teams and franchises that want to be first class, you have to continually invest in the fan experience. And whether that's a new scoreboard that we put in a couple of years ago, or if that's new security measures that are required to keep fans safe, our building will need to evaluate what needs to happen in order to allow fans to come back in a way where they feel secure and safe in the experience. What form that takes or how that looks, I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that at this point.
Yeah, but is it fair to say, Mark, that any investments going forward will have to be kept in mind that the fan at the center of anything that you do? Would that be a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you talk about the in-arena experience, it's about the fan. And first and foremost is that fan needs to feel safe and secure coming to your venue. And so that's something I know the folks in our building operations department take very, very seriously.
Sure. Fair enough. Atit?
So I have a slightly different point of view over here, Vineet.
Sure.
People like us, we will take all the precautions. I know sporting bodies will take some precaution, and there would be enough and more conversation as well as investment behind keeping the fans safe. But the challenge is to get the kids who are in the age group of 11, 12, who have started their sporting journey, whether as a sports fan or somebody who's playing the sport. Now, if we don't create a sort of environment for them to come to a sporting event, in the long term, we will not have any sports fans available worldwide. Because today I inculcated the habit of following a sport not when I turned 30, but when I turned 5 or 6, and we started watching and playing and all those things. Now, what do we do for the kids? How do we ensure that the kids are protected and make parents more safer in their mind that's taking my kid to a sporting event in the future, as well as sending my kid with his or her friends to a sporting event? Am I going to feel safe? Am I going to feel satisfied, content that everything would be fine and it is the experience and the bodies are taking care of them? Now, don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, significant amount of expertise, resources, investment, people, infrastructure, ecosystem, players, association, clubs, all of us need to come together, including government, to figure this out. Otherwise, there is a risk that over a long-term period, because of this 6-8 months an issue, and we all know, and WHO has been saying this, that we are going to live with the virus for a long period of time. So how do we mitigate this and try to get youngsters also onto the ground is a burning question, don't have answers, and I hope someday somebody comes with a sort of a rule book or a directive, so all of us go back with our kids to the sporting grounds.
Absolutely well articulated, well said, Atit, and we definitely are in for a completely new playbook on this for sure. Remus, quick one from you.
So fans have to be at the center of live sport, right? And that's critical. But if you remember, right, way back when IPL started here, the fan experience and how it has grown from there. I remember 2008, 2011 when we did the World Cup there as well. The toilets in the stadiums were not up to scratch, right? And leakages and sanitation and hygiene were not taken care of. And over a period of time, we've got our stadiums to be world class, right? Even security measures, having those scanners, etc., that wasn't even thought about at one point in time. So going forward, the new normal, being hygienic, being sanitized, the stadiums are going to take precedence. And I definitely see rights holders, not only in India but across the world, looking at this as a very key or critical factor before getting the fans into the ground, right? Because the last thing that these guys want to do, rights holders want to do, is have bad press or bad publicity. And I think, on a lighter vein, at some point this could be an activation. Yeah? Dettol can have the sanitizer at the stadiums, and look at it from that perspective. But more importantly, as Atit said, we have to be, responsible, right? When we're going out for a game and it's raining, we are going to wear jackets and go out, right? Or a raincoat and go out. So now we have to be responsible. When we are going for a game, we take the necessary precautions, wear the masks, wear whatever. Don't drink as much beer so we don't use the public loos. And, in time we're going to be safer. But this is here to stay. So we have to find answers and solutions.
Sure, absolutely fair. But in my view, whatever happens, and we will have answers to these questions going forward. None of us, I completely agree with you, we don't have these answers as of now. But in my view, whenever the live sport ecosystem opens up, I think there is much more for all of us to cheer for. And I have no doubts that fans would love to sample it. It's up to us, the industry, who are possibly creating that ecosystem and that awareness levels and the way we are taking care of our stadiums and are safe enough for people to come in. But absolutely, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of fans would love to come in as soon as it opens up. We can now open up for questions, and I can see lot of questions flowing in. Many questions in the e-sport domain already. So I'm just going to club one or two, and Mark, I'll bring you in here. There's a question directly for Bulls here to say, to promote an online presence, will the Bulls now venture into e-sport with a team in the NBA 2K League?
So I'm not going to have a great answer, unfortunately. I think esports is something that, the organization has kept a pulse on over the past, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and something that we continue to keep a pulse on. But as far as joining the NBA 2K League, I don't know that anything has changed, at least at this point.
Okay. Also, I mean, another question on esport, and I will bring Atit and Remus in here because it's more India-centric at this point in time. Would you guys, from a brand point of view, consider esport or gaming a significant, and how much weightage will you give from an investment standpoint going forward in the post-COVID environment? Atit?
Yeah, so see, why does a brand invest in an initiative, in a property, in a sporting event, or anything outside even a sporting event? If you have the audiences, if the audiences are congregating, if there is a mass following, brands will follow and money also would follow. So yes, it would be a new challenge. We don't know how the esports ecosystem will shape up going forward. But yeah, there is a great opportunity to try and the entry cost is not that very high. So one would take some amount of risk to try out, take some leap of faith, as we have taken a leap of faith, and that leap of faith has actually driven a lot of business into over the last so many years. Something similar needs to be done. Investments would be low. Understanding would be very, very limited. So we all learn together. We will all unlearn together. We will all relearn together. And it's a great opportunity to try it out, because if this becomes the next big thing, it's better to enter right now rather than wait till it's too late.
So fair one. Remus?
So, as Atit said, right, it's a very young market right now in terms of esports. My understanding of it is that yes, the numbers are large, quality is not as great in terms of the players. So you're using it more as a platform where people are coming and congregating, and not really from a athlete or from a team perspective. The teams that have just come about, I mean, I've been come together in the last 1 or 2 years at best. So Fanatics, who have PUBG, or the guys who play League of Legends. So these guys, it's the right time to start looking at it and start discussing, potential and how we can start using it for our benefit. Sometimes you look at it and you think a brand like, again, FMCG or say Monster, Red Bull, it's easy for them to integrate into the whole sport as such. But for somebody else, you need to start looking at it. Yeah, motorsports probably is an easier fit for us. And again, there you have that whole thing of motorsports is the one e-sport where you can traverse or transcend between the e-world and the real world very easily, So there are these potentials that we've been looking at.
Sure. I can see one very interesting question in terms of tangible and intangibles, in terms of measurement metrics in sports. Okay. So what I can make out from the question is, I mean, today in the new way, the way we are looking at sports, a lot of tangible assets which are to do with the match day mainly, if they go off, okay, how will you then evaluate a tangible and intangible? Because tangible being what we see on TV, and perhaps what we see with people and fans enjoying the sport, loving the sport on ground with fan experiences and so forth. Do you think intangibles will come into play? Because it's been a while we've been debating this, that sports gives benefits and values in terms of ROI beyond the tangibles. Okay, so any thoughts, Mark, from you, and then I'll come to Atit and Remus.
Yeah, I think the reality is every brand values different elements of their deal differently. There are companies that are primarily B2B. They may value the intangibles more than they value the media value of certain assets, where consumer brands a lot of times might want their name out there in as big of a way as possible. But specifically about the intangible values, obviously if we're playing games without fans, there are certain types of experiences that just won't be available. I think there are some things we can do to mitigate those losses to a degree, whether that's a private Zoom conference with a former player or a coach that's meant just for that company or a key client of that company. There are some different unique things we can do that will hopefully provide some of those intangible values. And look, the reality is we're not going to be able to make up for all the intangibles. And so how can we shift some of those benefits to some tangible side, at least in the short term?
But Mark, the reality is none of these things have been proven or tried and tested yet. So you'll have to reinvent the whole scenario around tangibles and intangibles. And that's going to be a challenge. Again, I guess we'll have to rally with the right holders and the franchisees with the advertisers, right?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I actually think the industry has gotten pretty good over the past several years at measuring media value, measuring the social media reach, measuring social media engagement. But not everyone, and certain brands I'm sure are exceptions, but the intangibles are the area that are more difficult to measure to begin with. And so I think it's going to require some honest conversations between brands and properties on, okay, here's how we view this, here's how we value it, what can we do right now or in the near future to find value that accomplishes something similar.
Sure. Any thoughts, Atit, on this? tangible, intangible has been a debate for a while.
Yeah. So see, everything needs to be quantified. Quantifiability as well as commercial value proposition is the single largest thing, because we are not running charities, we are running businesses. Yeah. As of yesterday, pre-lockdown, lot of tangible was getting evaluated. Now, let me give you an example. The Indian cricket team sponsorship, where we are on the front T-shirt.
Right.
The tangible benefit of that is number of people, number of matches, reach, and everything else, and discovery of the brand. And over a period of time, the brand will become stronger, equity will become better, brand love will go up. And that are all your tangible benefits, which can be easily tracked, researched, monitored. And what is intangible behind that? Now, that's a very difficult thing to calculate. Intangible is not, it's the whole thing is that everybody is a student of the game. And when you're playing a sport, you are learning every day, and you need to keep learning. And keep learning is what we stand for as a business, as an organization. So that's the intangible. Now, if one has to create a sort of a output in terms of what is the benefit, cost versus value benefit, it's going to take some time. We have never done it. But now going forward, the intangibles are going to become much, much more important, because the tangible value might not be there. It will come down significantly. So how do you measure the intangibles, and is it worth it? And if it's not worth it, then it will be a good to do thing and not a must to do thing.
Absolutely, Atith, and I'm personally very happy with the answer, actually. So great thumbs up to you on that. Remas, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the intangibles, for me, are far more important than the tangibles, right? Because the intangibles, one, directly link back to business. In the sense, this is where you get your sales incentives, where you get your dealer incentives. This is where you start putting all of these things into play, right? And more so, there's something called relationship, which in India works big, especially with cricket. And Atith knows that, and that's why he's talking about intangibles, because the 20 tickets that he gets for a match, the value for that, you just cannot put a rupee or a dollar value on it, right? Because when you're getting a call from X person one day before the game, and you give him those 3 tickets or those 2 tickets, you can't. It's difficult to put in numbers the value to it. Right?
You put that point right in the beginning, Remas. The money can't buy experience, right?
That's not experience. Yeah. So and I know people in the sponsorship world who would keep match tickets till the first half of a game, because they knew that they could get, if the game got interesting, they could get a call from somebody really important at halftime, and they would need to give it. And that was, wow, you got me tickets for a sold out game, right? So these things are far more important than the tangibles.
Is this point any different with you guys at the Bulls, Mark? Or it's similar to, and you echo the same sentiment from Atith and Remas?
No, I think they're spot on. I mean, the reality is, if you can take care of someone in a way that nobody else can, maybe you don't have their business for life, but they're gonna want you to have their business for life. And I think more than anything else, if you take care of your colleague at your client, that's great. But if you can do something for that client's child, then you're set. And I think, like I said before, the difficult thing about it is how do you value it, and how do you place a number on it? That's the piece that I think is a little bit more challenging.
Sure, fair enough. We take a last question from Mr. Nikhil Vyas, and this question is actually to Atith and Remas. Being brand custodians, will you want to negotiate and expect a lower sponsorship cost of the events happening closed door, considering media value will still be higher with increased reach? Guys, go for it.
Well, it's a short answer, yes. We want
Yeah, so Nikhil and I have worked very closely, and Nikhil and his company have been instrumental in doing a lot of sports initiative for us as Byju's. But yeah, Nikhil, absolutely, we will have to negotiate till the 2nd or 3rd decimal point. If there is value to be extracted, we will be able to extract that value, but there are 2 different parts. Now, the TV piece is going to be completely different. We don't know how the TV thing is going to happen, but I will be really, really surprised if advertisers and brands are going to put money up front at a higher cost, because TV reach is going to go up and they're going to get sports after a long period of time. So a lot of excitement, and then you charge a premium. We don't know. It is going to be a tried and tested model to start with, and eventually it will plateau out, or it will come to a level. But from a sponsorship perspective, we will have to watch. But as I said before, we are in the business of sports. It's not about negotiation. I'm not doing a sponsorship or a partnership with a team or with a franchise because I'm getting it at a low cost. If there is value to be created for my business by the partnership, both in terms of tangible and intangible, I will still go for it. But yeah, I would not take a step back in being aggressive and trying to get a dollar working for me better than what it was in the past.
That's good and very encouraging, Atit. One question we have, very interesting, again from an India perspective, more from Varun Pukral. How much are traditional formats like Test cricket likely to suffer to T20 cricket in order to recover the financial losses some countries have had recently? So it's a question around Test versus T20 and federation. So Varun, I think I can give you a quick perspective. I think it's going to be situational from board to board, and right now very difficult to assess because we are still all of us and all of us on this show. I mean, we're all of us figuring out the way things are, because it took us some time, maybe a week or two, to understand what this COVID-19 or this pandemic is about. And now that we have some sense of it, we're trying to make a larger sense in terms of how are we going to be behaving once the lockdown is open and the open world is going to come. The losses are there for everybody. I don't think any business is there who has not taken a hit, or that's a given. I think these are moving parts, and we will have answers to these questions going forward. Having said that, my personal view is this entire pause, and we don't know in India how much pause it's going to be, maybe 60 days, 90 days, 100 days more, we don't know. I think sport will come out as one of the biggest winners from a category standpoint, because it brings people together, it develops bonds, it develops friendships, it teaches you a lot of things in terms of leaderships, in terms of team building, and so on and so forth. So I personally don't think there's going to be a massive impact in the longer term. In short term and middle term, it's a no-brainer. There's going to be an impact for all of us. But I think we will come out as winners, and sports would be one of the first sectors to warm up to this entire wave of scaling up. And that's the way I look at it. So I may not have answered your question from a Test cricket or a T20 point of view, but I have given you an overall view, if that helps.
Vineet, I'd like to pitch in here.
Sure.
So one is we have the FTP in place, right? So for my understanding, the FTP is in place, and therefore those X amount of games need to be played over a period of time.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a vacuum in this window. I see the ICC coming back and looking at how to bridge these gaps and making sure that whatever tests had to be played would be played. Maybe they will extend the FTP by a few months, to ensure that these games happen. Also, from a broadcast perspective, most boards have broadcast deals in place. That's where they get their money from, right? So if anything, the broadcaster might be looking at lower revenues over a period of time and gate revenues for the associations. And gate is a minimal part of it. So I don't see this having too much of an impact on Test cricket.
Fair enough. Superb. So we have time, absolutely 2 to 3 minutes for one last question from Rohan Gupta. With the shift to digital assets and activations, what happens to regional sponsorships since digital assets cross boundaries? So the point is, digital is obviously a larger thing. I mean, it cross boundaries. What happens to regionalization of the sporting content? Remus, you want to go for it?
No, that's a good point. And again, I think it comes back to the whole renegotiating of the rights package, right, with the rights holder, and these things will be looked at, right? So even there are the details of, say, for example, the usage of players. Earlier, it would always be we had to use 3 players in an activation, and that would be in a meet and greet. But now with digital and taking activations on social media, things are changing. So I think this is one of those points where you'll have to look and renegotiate and look at things differently.
Mark, would you look at this question a bit differently from a US standpoint, or you would? How would you look at this question?
Yeah, I mean, look, the shift to digital assets for us, the NBA was ahead of the game compared to most sports leagues in growing its social and digital following. So we've had partners heavily invested in digital for a number of years now. I guess what I would say is I don't see this as an either or scenario. There are some brands that their goals in partnering with us are focused on the region, and we have assets designed to help with that. But there are some brands who they'd rather have a national or international reach, and if that's the case, then we have the capability now with digital in order to do that. So I think it just depends on the company, because the capabilities are there for teams to do both.
Sure. Fantastic. Fair enough. So one last question from my side. Considering that we have been indoors from a lockdown perspective, anything that you have picked up which is positive, which you would want to continue as a habit, or any one habit you had which you want to let go, or you have developed in the lockdown period which you want to let go? Mark, go ahead. We'll start with you.
Put me on the spot. Well, I already mentioned we've cooked more than we normally do at the beginning. I guess so. I'll answer the one habit I'd like to wean off of as this ends. I feel like I've been awfully attached to my cell phone during this, more so than normal. I feel like when I'm just sitting around, all I'm doing is scrolling on Twitter. And so that's one area that once we get out of here, I'd like to cut back on a little bit.
Okay. Cool. So great, guys. Absolutely fabulous having you on this webinar. A couple of points, a couple of takeaways from my perspective is, one is sports is here to stay, maybe a little bit of an impact in the short and middle term, but long term it will come up as a very, very strong winner. Brands are looking at it in a very, very positive way. There is no impact or there is no change in strategy whatsoever. Digital might play a key role going forward, and those valuations might be considered from a decision-making point of view. And of course, from a fan engagement standpoint, keeping fans at the center, all the investments will have to be considered from that standpoint. So on that note, have a great day, Mark. From an US point of view, have a great evening to all you guys in India. Thank you very much for joining this webinar, and see you at the games very soon.
You guys. Namaste.
Thank you.